Thank you, Mario, for your kind words. It's really my privilege to be here in this intellectual community at Sussex University. Also my privilege to have this opportunity of sharing some of my work with this forum. I would like to take the opportunity also to thank the generosity of the School of Education and Social Welfare and the research program led by Professor Mario Novelli to fund my visiting research position here. I really appreciate the opportunity. I recognize that it has given me the reprieve from some of the routines which keeps us away from writing. So really thank you very much for that generosity. The work that I'm going to present today, I'll come to it. Mario said that I'm going to work in Aga Khan University in Karachi, Pakistan, my campus there. Pakistan, as some of you might know, is in South Asia, and this is Karachi, way down south. Karachi is a very big city of about 20 million people, and I started my academic career there in the university. Then the university has campuses in East Africa, the same university. So I worked in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, and I see one of my students here from Tanzania, Christine. Okay, so that's a little bit about myself. The work today that I'm going to present draws on the research work, education and social cohesion, and that, like it was a large project, and like any large project, it's a teamwork. And my work is deeply informed by my colleagues' experience and insights. I have named the co-investigators, principal investigators and team members here, but many of them are sitting here. Noreen, Laila, Mario, all of you, thank you very much. This is a UNICEF and ESRC funded project, and it has, I will be drawing upon this work to present today. But in some ways, when I was preparing this presentation, it reminded me of my work with EdQual. EdQual was a large research consortium with Bristol University 2005 to 2010, and I thought I must bring up that finding as a recurring question for the education system in Pakistan. So, a little bit about the project. This education and social cohesion in Pakistan, as Mario has just said, was a large multi-country project and had three prongs to it. The role of policy, how policy integrates considerations for social cohesion, and you might ask, what do we mean by social cohesion? We bring here the perspective very much, which is evident in UNICEF's work, that social cohesion comes in a society where multiple groups are, in any society, is diverse inherently in a number of ways. But if the different groups are working with, living with shared values, there is mutual trust, then the likelihood of the society and the community breaking out into conflict is much reduced. And education has a strong role to play in this notion of positive peace. Positive peace is not like stopping conflict, it is like preparing the ground to avoid conflict in the first place. And that's the perspective which has been going around, which has gone on to inform this project, the three-pronged project, for looking at how policy, teachers and youth have incorporated considerations on how education can play a role in promoting peace through social cohesion. I will focus on the work on teachers and teacher educators, which I worked on in Karachi, in Pakistan, in the province of Sindh, along with my co-team members. The fieldwork in Sindh, as I will explain a little bit later, is one of the provinces in Pakistan, and the research work involved a survey of 266 teachers, which was, there was a wide variety in the sample, because these were the teachers who were recruited in a very big teacher education center, public teacher education center in a small town in central Sindh. And the teachers were men, women, Muslim, non-Muslim, different languages. So the sample was rich, and my findings will draw heavily on the work on the report from the survey, although we also had a large corpus of interviews, focus group discussions. We analyzed a whole battery of documents, and we also observed sessions in the teacher education programs being delivered in Pakistan. The theoretical framework guiding this study is a 4 R's framework. And yesterday we were talking about, colleagues, some of you may have heard of this framework quite a bit. The orientation was that, of the 4 R's framework it's a social justice framework. And redistribution here means opening up access and opportunity. And but that doesn't bring in, opening up access doesn't necessarily bring in social justice, as we will see. It is complemented by recognition and representation. Now I must say that these 4 R's are not sequential in nature. It doesn't mean that one follows the other. They are very much parallel and deeply intertwined. So recognition entails respecting the diversity. I mean, look at the diversity in any social setting. So if we look at the diversity in the classroom here, what does it mean for the educational process? How will the diversity in terms of gender, in terms of language, in terms of ethnicity, how will that be recognized in true sense of the word to enable participation? And if you look at recognition and representation not from a tokenistic perspective, then these are really political processes, because they require questioning some of the hierarchies which might be inherent in a social system. So, for example, if I go to the context of Pakistan, there are hierarchies on the basis of gender. There are hierarchies on the basis of language, on the basis of social class. How would those be questioned and critiqued in the process of recognizing the diversity and enabling the diverse groups to participate? So redistribution, recognition and representation. But for promoting peace, it's not enough to stay there. It is important to take a further step, and that is of reconciliation. Reconciliation processes means that if there are historical injustices, whether in the past or whether happening in the present, if you do not overtly deal with them, if you do not process them and bring them to the negotiation table, then it will not help to build a peaceful and just society. So this is the theoretical framing that informs the work of this project. A little bit about Pakistan. You saw where Pakistan is in terms of its geographical location. It was created in 1947 when the British left the Indian subcontinent, and there was partition, creating the present-day Pakistan, and then the India, and subsequently Pakistan was also divided into Pakistan and Bangladesh. Population is 189 million people, and I put the word estimated there because we haven't had a census since 1998. Census has become a political issue, and so we are going on estimations and projections. The government has promised that there will be a census in 2017, but let us see. There is there's a substantial proportion of under 15s, which has implications for the education provision and education access. Pakistan is a lower middle income country. I said in my abstract that it's a country, the people are brave and resilient. And why I said that? Because there's been a lot of conflict and war and all those tensions, and yet the people have managed to move up from lower income to lower middle income status. But if you look at the human development indicators, we are quite low. We are quite low even in the region. And with the provinces, there are 4 provinces: Punjab, Sindh, KP and Balochistan. Then there are some federally administered areas, and if we look at the statistics about the provinces, Punjab and Sindh are higher in terms of human development. and KP and Balochistan are way behind. However, I would say I don't want to really go with what these numbers say, because the reality on the ground, there is so much disparity between the rich and the poor. The wealth is concentrated so in such few hands that there is, the prevalence of poverty, especially in Sindh, and especially in rural Sindh, where this research was located, poverty is quite high. Education is a constitutional right, and there has been a recent clause added to the constitution which says extended the right to education beyond primary for 5 to 16 years. And education is, in terms of policy making, in terms of delivery, in terms of governance, is a provincial matter. So Punjab, Sindh, KP, Balochistan, they all have their own provincial setups for education. There has been a massive expansion in education system. At the end, I provide the references, and I've taken these references from the Pakistan education statistics, which says there has been a massive expansion. There has been an increase in literacy rates. So we had been hovering around 60% literacy, but it has gone up to 72%. But even within that literacy, there is a discrepancy. The rate for female literacy is much lower than that of males. Although the schooling provision has expanded, but some reports say that there's 15 million children out of school. That's a huge number. Even if you say that that's an exaggerated number, still it's a huge number. And if you look at that number, there are discrepancies. Rural children are more out of school as compared to urban, and more girls out of school as compared to boys. So we come to, what is the relationship between education and peace, between teachers and peace? To understand that, we have to understand a little bit about the socio-cultural context and what are the drivers of conflict in the context. Religion is an important part of the daily life discourse in the way life is structured in Pakistan. And religion is also an important, I would say, a driver of conflict. When Pakistan came into being in 1947, the preceding struggle was largely political. But at the time of independence, in 1947, there was large-scale communal violence. And that violence was really on like Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs killing each other. It was, that has left a lasting impact on the psyche of the people. Religion as a marker of identity is still on the psyche of the people. 96% Muslims and about 15% Shia. And those 15, over the last 5 years, there has been a marked increase in sectarian violence, which has led to the killings on the basis of Shia and Sunni sects. Some journalists even say that this is a proxy war being played out between Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shia Iran. So that's a journalistic interpretation. But nonetheless, that has come up on the scene. Then there are 4% non-Muslims, Christians, Hindus. A large proportion of Hindus are in Sindh, in rural Sindh. And of recent, there has been a spate of violence against attacks on churches and temples. So you can see religion being a driver of conflict. In the 1970s, Bhutto's government, senior Bhutto, not Benazir, Bhutto's government started the process of Islamization, when Islamization became part of the political discourse. And during that time, Ahmadis, who were considered as a sect of Muslims, were declared non-Muslims. And that still reverberates, that decision. In the 80s and 90s, Ziaul Haq really accelerated the process of Islamization. There was legislation which was taken from a very narrow Sunni perspective, so that other groups, sects within Islam, felt marginalized. Curricula were played with. Curricula were infused with, and facts were falsified in the textbooks and curriculum. And they were infused with a very narrow interpretation of Islam. And also that was the time when the Afghan war and jihad against the Afghan-Russian war, and jihad, it was the time of that, and Pakistan had become a party to it, to that international war games that were being played in the region. And of recent, since 9/11, Pakistan has been embroiled in the war on terror. So you can see, and the war on terror also has religion as a major kind of a factor in it. Other drivers of conflict, the widening gap among rich and poor. I'll just give you an anecdote. The difference between rich and poor is so stark that I was reading a report on real estate in Karachi, the city where I come from. And there are parts of Karachi where real estate is so expensive that square yard for square yard, they compare with the expensive real estate in California and the USA. And yet people can afford it. So, which means that there's that much of wealth and yet there is stark poverty. So widening gap among rich and poor. Gender inequity, I did mention the literacy and access. Across educational institutions, women do not have parity of access, and even women's status in society is paradoxical. So you would see on the one hand Benazir Bhutto, the first woman prime minister of an Islamic country, and then you have cases like Malala Yousafzai, the girl who gets shot at simply because she wants to go to school. So it's a paradoxical situation in terms of women's status in society. Ethnicity and language. So language is again a very big kind of a divider in some ways. In Karachi in the 70s, there were major language riots. Why? Because so the Punjabis, Punjab is the largest province, and Punjab also has a very dominant position in the government and the military. And Punjabis, 55% speakers of Punjabi language. Then those are the other language speakers. But Urdu has been given the status of the national language. Urdu is the lingua franca, but Urdu also, interestingly, is the language of the Muhajirs now. The Muhajirs. Muhajirs are the people who came from India, the people and their descendants who came from India at the time of independence. So there is a sense, there is a real sense of regional languages, Sindhi, Punjabi, all those languages feeling a little bit, space being reduced. In fact, I'm staying at the IDS, and 2 days ago, we were in a gathering of Pakistani students and others, and the topic was all about how should the language issue be resolved so that other language speakers do not feel marginalized at the expense of Urdu being the national language or the lingua franca. So, education system, as I had said in my abstract, that education, again, you would say education would play a role for social mobility, for bringing people together, but the way education is structured in Pakistan currently, it has got three parallel systems. The public school system, which is the largest still at the moment, and it has got 4 tiers: primary, secondary, higher secondary, and tertiary. And public school system is largely Urdu medium. It's offered in the national language and in some cases also the regional language. Okay? Now, and it also has national curriculum and it's gender segregated. Now when you come to the private school system, there has been a mushrooming of low fee paying private schools, although there were a select elite private schools have always been there. The private schools are largely English. And English also brings a status. It's a post-colonial language. It has perceptions of power. So you see private school, English medium, okay, so that's anybody who can afford even 100 rupees per month will pay for the children's fees and send them to a private school because it's English medium. And so those who cannot afford even that little bit of money will end up sending their children to the government schools. It's Urdu medium. It doesn't have much status in the current scenario. And then there is the madrasa system, which is completely separate, a different governance structure, and the madrasa serves the poorest of the poor because it offers boarding and lodging. So if parents cannot afford to bring up their children, they put them in the madrasa, so at least they don't have to provide for food and clothing. So you see, largely speaking, education is also structured along the lines of social class. In that case, then the question arises, what was education doing? Is it a part of the problem, or is it part of the solution? With the narrowing of, with the disparity in the different education systems, I might add that my presentation is about the secular school system. It's not about madrasas. That's a whole different ball game and requires a different lens altogether. So with all these issues that I noted, what was education doing? For to promote social mobility, cohesion, valuing diversity, and yet there was a feeling that education has to be a part of the solution. It can't be a part of the problem. It has to build a sense of national narrative of identity and cohesion. And from that perspective, there's been about two decades, at least 15, 20 years, that there's been money being pumped into education reform. But that money has been largely going into schools and improving the teaching of science and mathematics and improving this, that, and the other things. Teacher education was kind of falling between the cracks. And then it was recognized that teacher education, with its outdated and irrelevant curricula, teacher education had just 1 year certificate courses for primary and elementary schools and a 1 year B.Ed. 1 year actually means 3 terms, actually 9 months of engagement, very little. And so people really sat up and took notice and said, we need to reform teacher education. So a 2-year associate degree and a 4-year, leading to a 4-year B.Ed honors. Curriculum was designed for it. A National Council for Teacher Education to bring everything under kind of a unified governance structure, standards for accreditation of teacher education programs, national professional standards for teachers. All of this happened in 2009. And as we speak, I think the second cohort of the ADE degree has graduated. And alongside, there were donor-supported development projects, large-scale development projects in rural areas, in schools, directly in schools. All of this reform was ostensibly led by the Ministry of Education and the government agencies, but really, in true sense of the word, a lot of donor money that was being pumped in the post-2011, post-9/11 scenario. It's that money which was driving the reform. The aim implicit in this reform was that education should be for cultural pluralism and diversity. Just as an example, from the mission statement for the curriculum for the B.Ed, which was led by the Higher Education Commission. And it wants to promote, the statement says that it is necessary to revise the curriculum to promote critical thinking, reflective practice, and notice this, to facilitate the process of multiculturalism and pluralism in our education system. So that kind of was the ethos in the reform. But when we were doing our research, there was also skepticism on the ground that this is the top agenda. Is it really owned by the people on the ground? And some of those questions come up in our data as well. So that's the scenario in which we took up the research project and explored teachers and teacher educators' perspectives about the role of education and the role of teachers in social cohesion. I'm going back to I talked about the survey of 266 teachers. That was a large survey, had many elements to it, and I am focusing on these 3 questions which were raised. So what are the main issues regarding social cohesion and justice in the country? And teachers really had a very good, teachers and teacher educators had a strong understanding, a nuanced understanding of what those issues were. But 80% of them put religion as the number one issue. So I've taken a few illustrative extracts here. The biggest issue is discrimination on the basis of sect, the Shias and the Sunnis, sect, religion, and then ethnicity, rich and poor. So there is that recognition that there isn't just one issue. There are multiple issues: poverty, rich and poor, ethnicity, but number one is religion. The second one, interestingly, is from a Hindu teacher. And it's interesting to note that even she notes religion, but from a different perspective. She talks about caste system. So some of you may be aware that among Hinduism, there are different castes. And the top castes have certain privileges which the lower castes do not have. And therefore, she is referring to the divisive forces in the society, but from her perspective of the caste system. In our society, sectarianism, the sects between the Shias and the Sunnis has played a role, and then on the basis of language and ethnicity. So teachers understood what were the issues, and they have placed religion as a key factor. If those are the issues, what then is the role of education? What can education do? And the finding is that people have very high expectations of education. They really believe that education can play a role. So education can play an important role. What kind of education? Islamic education. Education brings awareness and enlightenment. So high expectations from education. Okay, with all these issues, there is a sense that education can do a lot. I might add that only a few of the teachers noted issues related to girls' education, and those few were mainly females. So it's interesting to note that girls' education is still very much upfront for the women teachers. So education can play a vital role. So high expectations from education. A little bit of a critique, there should be one education system for rich and poor. Remember I mentioned that the public and the private, the public is seen for the poor and private is seen for the rich. Education can end hatred. We should include topics to teach about tolerance. So that's about education. What then is the role that teachers can play? What can you play a role? And the finding is, so here there's a complex finding. So one very strong sense is a high sense of agency. I, the teacher, can do something. Before religion, I will teach about humanity. Teachers, agentic role. I can teach students to respect, whether a Muslim or a Hindu. We will teach our students about peace, that Islam is a religion of peace. And an interesting strand was that while teachers noted religion to be a #1 issue in the breakdown in social unity, they also looked towards religion to provide a resolution to that issue. This one, again a female teacher, looks at gender and says, I will work with society in granting permission to education. We will teach our children through the example of our beloved Prophet Muhammad. Muhammad is the prophet that the Muslims believe in. And peace be upon him is a mark of respect that we note when we name the prophet. So, a high sense of agency and again a feeling that religion can help us in bringing unity and cohesion. But there was another strand, very clear. Teachers said it's not our role. We don't have anything to do with it. We try to stick to topic, this one says. But this one is interesting in the sense that he also feels that talking about Shia, Sunni, Sindhi, Balochi would be sensitive, would be difficult and could even hurt someone. So he says we have to talk in a neutral way so that no one feels bad. And how do you talk in a neutral way? You stick to your topic. You just don't go into the social issues. The other one says, I would try to focus fully on my subject. So this sense of academic curriculum being my role to deliver, and if there are other issues around it, no, that's not my job. It's not the responsibility of educational institutions, this one says. So clearly, there are two sides to how teachers view their role. So when we look at it in terms of consolidating the findings, there are high expectations from education about the role that education can play in promoting a positive sense of peace that will help in breaking down, avoiding conflict. There is a high sense of agency among the teachers, which you could see. But there was also the opposite strand where teachers felt, no, they shouldn't be doing anything about these issues. They must limit themselves to academic curriculum. Gender issues were also noted, but the concern was that they were not noted to the extent of gender discrimination that is present in the society. It's not reflected so much in the psyche of the people, and especially it was noted only mostly by women teachers. And I feel that if that's the case, then obviously society and gender are gender is a sociologically rooted notion, and society is not just made of women, men and women. So that's an issue. But the biggest issue here is people were looking at religion as an issue, as a driver of conflict, but they were also looking at religion as something to help them address the issue. Where is the talk about diversity? You have such a high hope from education, but what kind of education? Is it going to be more of the same? That's a question that teachers and teacher educators never raised, and that's something that I think needs to come up. And this, when I was thinking about what type of education, it took me back to my work in EdQual, which started in 2005, so many years ago, and we were looking at gender equity issues in mathematics and science classrooms, where popular perceptions are that girls are not good enough to do mathematics. And here in this project also, it was all about open access, provide access, education is good. So all this report about culture, there being no demand for girls' education in the culture, no. Our findings do not say that. The issues are on supply side, they're not on demand side. But the concern is what kind of education, and if you look at what this female teachers journal says, doesn't challenge the status quo. What kind of education? If the education is going to be more of the same, will it bring about social transformation? That's an issue. So it goes on to say boys perform better in mathematics than girls. Okay? And then says they should be exposed to opportunities for professions such as engineering. And goes on to say girls are not interested in studying mathematics because after school they will not be provided much opportunity to engage with mathematics. So should education not be changing that dynamic? Should it not be challenging the social hierarchies between girls and boys, men and women, disciplinary knowledge? Could not find it. And I think that question about what kind of education will challenge the status quo is an important question that teachers and teacher educators need to concern themselves with. Okay, there's another quote, but I'll move on. What then are the recommendations for policy and practice in an education system which is so divided and in a situation where there are so many drivers of conflict? So policy, I think there are clear recommendations that policy actions need to be taken to mitigate and reduce the structural divides. How budgets are distributed, public spending on education is very little. I think Pakistan to date spends about barely 3% of the GDP. Okay? And even that, there's a lot of pilferage and filtering, so that how much actually reaches the education and the schools is a big question. There's so much dependence on donors, and that if donor money dries up, many of the reform initiatives also on the board. There is a very public-centric view about allocation of budget, about governance, about quality assurance. This is in spite of the fact that now there is a reasonably big private sector. Now whether private sector should be there or not be there, whether low-fee private schools are good or bad, that's another debate. But at the moment, they are providing education to at least 30% And depending on where you are and which sector of it, which level of education you look at, whether primary or immediately post-primary, that could be even as high as 50%. But the governance is very, am I out of time?
Okay.
Okay. So the governance structure is very public centric. We look at, for example, the data that is collected by the Education Management Information Systems. We don't collect data on private schools. And therefore, decisions about governance and quality assurance in private schools could be improved if there was data driving those decisions. Now, we have got the standards for example, for the minimum standards for teacher education and for teachers. Yet, well, I agree, it's early stages. We are working towards how those standards would be applied to the private schools. So structural divides are there. There is disparity in the provision on the supply side of education and teachers. For the book that I'm writing, I was looking at data, and there are big issues on the supply side of female teachers for the secondary schools, for girls' secondary schools in rural areas. So there should be policies which would help take affirmative action and reduce these disparities. Language of instruction is a bone of contention. So should there be two systems of schools with two clear different languages of instruction? What should be the status of regional languages as languages of instruction? Those are big questions which are left unanswered in the currently prevailing national education policy. And so policy level, the language issue needs to be resolved in terms of giving space to the regional languages, not just space in terms of taking a decision, but space in terms of budgetary allocation for the development of that language, for materials development, for teacher capacity development, so on and so forth. For policy, there needs to be continuous dialoguing among the different stakeholders about the purpose and process of education. So, if the top level documents say there should be cultural pluralism and diversity, that's what the document says of the document on curriculum on teacher education. Is that going to happen? It will have to be a process where these issues are critiqued, where the skepticism about donor agendas driving the education scene have to be taken face on and resolved so that there is a greater ownership of the education reform that is being happening. In teacher education, as I said, we saw that quote from the teacher who is literally shying away from bringing up sensitive issues in the classroom. There should be explicit focus on sensitive issues. I was looking at the curriculum on teacher education, and I was looking at the courses. And so there is a course which says inclusive education, but it has generic strategies, inductive approaches to education, cooperative learning. It doesn't have explicit focus on key drivers of conflict: gender, language. How do you teach in a class which is so multilingual, and yet you are imposing a language of instruction which the children do not understand? So those issues are both cognitive, but also in terms of inclusion, exclusion from the learning process. So explicit strategies need to be done. There has to be, in the teacher education courses, skills must be developed through capacity development of teacher educators to bring this schism between the social and the academic, to close that and to bring that closer, to see how teachers' agentic role is seen not just in terms of academic provision, but also in terms of resolving, reconciling some of the conflict issues in the education process. So I think those are the recommendations for policy and practice. And here are some of the sources that I referred to, but there are others which I can make available. And I'd be happy to take questions.